So we had a bit of a concerning development that's happened here with not only the YouTube space, but also just the emulation space in general, as one person online apparently could be facing jail time over showing off one of these, which maybe I should censor that, I don't know, one of these like the lower powered emulation devices that have become very, very popular over the last couple of years, mostly because they actually work really well and they're fairly cheap. Many of them you can get for 50 or 60 bucks, and they feel quite premium and play a range of different systems, mostly from our childhood, but nostalgia does work to sell things very, very well. Nonetheless, it's become very popular, and it seems like one YouTuber here in Italy has attracted the wrong kind of attention, and now they're sort of unsure if their videos, their channel will exist in a few months, and if they'll have to go to jail. It sounds crazy to me, but we'll see what's going on here today. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. So this is something I do think is really important to bring attention to right now, because the emulation scene in general around YouTube videos for these devices has had a lot of concerns over the last several years. And generally, it's discussions and things happening behind the scenes. Sometimes it ends up spilling over publicly into different videos about, for example, Nintendo doing copyright strikes if you show one of their games running on these devices or just in emulation, which we'll get back to here in a minute. First, though, this is Once We're Nerd, and I was not aware of this person on YouTube, and when I saw their channel in the video, it makes sense. Their videos are in Italian, and I don't know Italian, so it kind of makes sense why I would have never run across their channel. Now, this video in particular, they reported me bye or goodbye. The way I was able to at least get information from it is from YouTube's auto dubbing, which it just reads back the translated transcription in kind of the robot voice that tries to match up as the video runs along. And for the most part, it does an all right job. I mean, I feel like I got most of the information from the video. And then also Ars Technica here did an entire write-up on it, which I will link down below in the description, because I mean, there's quite a bit to this. Anyway, Once We're Nerd does have many, many videos on some of these devices. Think of Anbernic being a big one, where they'll even reproduce the Game Boy Advance. That was a really cool system that I also did a video on, so we'll see how that goes. But something I have learned over time is not to show Nintendo games on there. Now, a while ago, that wasn't necessarily something that people were doing, myself included. But as we went along and realized that Nintendo was becoming more and more aggressive on videos that showcase that, it was like, pull back a bit on some of this stuff. Even older titles, like from the original Nintendo, people aren't sure how it would work out, as Nintendo was striking down videos and doing copyright claims, and it was all over the place. There were concerns that channels would just disappear when you get hit with a ton of these strikes from just Nintendo. Now, I will say there is some guesswork here when it comes to the complaint that was filed that sort of kicked this whole thing off, and two companies were named and kind of speculated on, I'll say, which we'll get to here soon. Anyway, this, again, from Ars Technica, Once We're Nerd attracted the attention of Italy's Ministry of Economy and Finance, which is tasked with policing copyright in the country. In the video, first spotted by Android Authority, the YouTuber explains the Guardia di Finanza appeared at his door in April with a search warrant. Now, what's happened here is the agents accused the creator of promoting pirated copyrighted materials stemming from his coverage of Anbernic handheld game consoles. So they mentioned the emulation software is not illegal. Like the emulators that are on these devices are pretty straightforward, and you'll recognize many of them from, I don't know, on PC or if you're using Batacera or something like that. It's pretty common stuff. But as they point out, a surprising number of these devices ship chock full of preloaded ROMs. The channel showed multiple Sony and Nintendo games running on the device. So, as mentioned, they're far from the only channel saying showing these things off and stuff in videos. And the legal gray area. So, I'm not familiar with Italy's copyright laws. I'm barely familiar with all the copyright laws that happen in the US, and it doesn't seem like it's just me. Just in general with the law in the U.S. and everything that's going on, people are shocked every week at this time. But as is pointed out here, which I do want to mention real quick, It's unclear who made the original complaint against the channel. Once Were a Nerd has seen documents that cite copyrighted materials from Nintendo and Sony, but Guardia di Finanza doesn't need to reveal that detail until the preliminary investigation is finished. Case can be brought by the agency itself. So right now it sounds like Once Were a Nerd is just sort of in limbo right now, trying to see what exactly is going to happen, because they have to, apparently the agencies have to go through their entire investigation, and then they'll come back and let them know what I guess they're being charged with, if anything. Could be like, hey, you know what, we're just dropping it, but if it is, so they're pointing to Nintendo as potentially someone who's made this claim. And I will say, in the US, now this doesn't sync up completely. As they mentioned, this has been ongoing for a couple of months now, but typically these complaints would have happened at that time. And if you recall, here in the US, we just had the FBI that shut down like the popular, like a Switch ROM site, but also PlayStation ROM sites technically. So that would have been probably a complaint that would have also been filed months ago to get that all done and worked out. So I don't know, maybe the timing syncs up a bit more than I'm thinking, but it is interesting that we see that happen with Sony and Nintendo, and then also here Sony and Nintendo. And I think people do tend to forget about this with Sony. They are somewhat active in this space as well. There is a very, very popular legacy ROM site. And I'm not going to say which one it is, but if you've been, it's been around for a long time. It's a tried and true. It's a reliable, old reliable, right? Well, there was a point in time recently where they had many companies apparently issue takedown notices for different games, and they were just kind of disappearing and had a message like, oh, Sega has requested this, EA has requested, Nintendo, Sony was one. Interestingly enough, those games have returned to the site. I'm not sure how. I don't know. But that seems to be something they also went through at a point in time. So again, many of these companies are active online. When it comes to this, Nintendo is just the most over-the-top aggressive out of all of them. And they continue to prove that constantly, like every other month, it seems like. Okay, so I mentioned Sony. Like, for example, Sony had gone as far as to go online and seek out a person who was selling PlayStation 4. This was in 2018, by the way. PlayStation 4 systems that were jailbroken and came preloaded, as you can see here, with 63 full games plus one. So I don't know why they didn't just write 64. Maybe that's search out. Who knows? Anyway, Sony went online, bought 2 of these from the person, and they were able to then prove definitively, because they bought them, that they were selling PlayStation 4 systems jailbroken with pirated games. So, like, Sony is very active online with a lot of this stuff as well. So, as I mentioned, Anbernic themselves, here's their website. This is something that they would also kind of need to clean up, but here, a lot of these places operate out of China, and that, I mean, what do you do at that point if you're any of these companies? Well, you go after, apparently, people who are advertising some of these devices. Well, if Anbernic keeps doing this, you're probably going to have people who are just like, yeah, you know what, I'm not really going to show off the system, because when you turn it on in a video, you're probably going to be greeted with a bunch of games being preloaded on it. So here's the RG35XX Pro. 64 gigabyte, 128 gigabyte card. So there's 2 cards in there. There's the 64 gigs. So these things have 2 slots. This is the Plus, so it's not the Pro. But there are 2 slots in here. One typically is what you'll leave like your OS on, and then you'll have just a storage card that you would put, say, your images for games and stuff on. Well, if you scroll down and look, it advertises it completely here. Here's all the emulators. That's fine, you know. And then you scroll down and it's like, oh yeah, here's the 64 gigabyte card plus 120 gigabyte card with 11,000 plus games that are loaded on it. So yes, they are technically selling and shipping games. This one SD card here, if they, I mean, I'm sure for them, they want to keep that because it just, in their mind, oh, who cares? This is like, we're shipping this out of China, whatever. And it'll just add more value to it. Sure. And many people out there who are buying them, like, they're not going to care. They get a bunch of preloaded games. But now more than ever, you're going to see, I'm sure, people on YouTube who are like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to pass on doing a video on that, which is a shame for 2 reasons. One, obviously, if they put out a really cool system and cool product for, like, I'm sure this is very good. If it's like this Plus, it's good, and it's $61, $61.09. And it's a cool system, you know? So in that case, there's just not going to be much discussion around it because they're shipping it with a boatload of ROMs. And it's not just this, it's a number of them. Like if you look on here's the one that looks like a Game Boy Advance SP. Every one of these mentions just thousands and thousands of ROMs that are shipping with it. So that becomes a problem at that point. Because then, yes, you can make the case that, oh, look, I'm showing you this device that has a bunch of ROMs on there. But to go a bit further, the concern really has been in emulation for showing things off online, which this is a shame because emulation obviously now more than ever with kind of how it almost seems many of these companies are not at all concerned about game preservation or the idea of people being able to play some of these older games easily. But if that is the case, then emulation serves a very important purpose at that point for being able to catalog and play a lot of these older games that are just not sold anymore unless you go on eBay and you spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But something that was interesting to me is if I have, which I now more than ever, I have like all the means to back up many of these games. But if I have like Star Fox Adventures and I go, you know what? This game is awesome. I would love to play it on one of these handheld devices. I'm going to back the game up myself, which I can do. I have the Pico boot and stuff. You can do that very easily on the GameCube now. Get an entire file, move it over, my actual backed up game that I have. It'd probably still get struck down by Nintendo. You know, it's just kind of the way it is. And you go, okay, well, you move along. So no matter what, it doesn't seem like it's something that is going to be easy to get around. And what's happened now is I've had many discussions with people for some of these devices that are just kind of shying away from the idea of showcasing emulation at all in their videos. At this point, I'm completely away from showing people Nintendo games running. Like if it's an IP that's owned by Nintendo, even if it's 20, 30 years old, I just won't show it in the video at all. And I kind of think I might run into that eventually with Sony at some point, which is also weird because I bought a Blu-ray drive for a desktop that is under the compatibility for, like, there's certain drives that are compatible with PS3 games to rip them to your system, like the PC, and then you just have a backup of your PlayStation 3 game. That also probably wouldn't matter much there. And I've actually backed up a number of my PS3 games. I have like a 4 terabyte drive that's just filling up with these full Blu-ray rips of PS3 games. And I just don't think that would matter much to Sony anyway. So I think that is something that will come into play eventually. I don't know about Sega with Dreamcast. They don't seem to care that much, so I might be good there. But it is becoming harder and harder to really showcase some of this stuff. Like we're kicking around the idea of an emulation video soon for a device that I think is actually rather interesting at a $60 price point that can do quite a bit. Like a desktop TV box that's pretty small, and most people wouldn't really assume that it would be great at emulation. But after doing some tests, it's running GameCube, it's running PS2, PSP, and I'll check original Xbox, but $60 and it looks like a little mini console. It's kind of cool. And it's a system that's like 11 years old now, so readily available. We'll see if I get to that, but right now this is it's just the emulation scene online just keeps getting kicked more and more and more. And now hearing that someone on YouTube might be they're facing jail time over showing off these little devices that just playing like Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 games and stuff sounds absolutely crazy, but that's just kind of where we are now. So we'll see how this goes for Once We're Nerd. You can check their video out. I'll have that linked, as well as the Ars Technica article that really goes over a lot of this. But let me know what you think about this down below, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.